American. I've not read this other one yet. I almost always keep them. They also have some great book reviews. I'm just curious what kinds of things. Wow, it's a long article. It's definitely the major. Wow, it's a long article. He's a professor at the College of New Jersey. He talks about fundamentalism and how that kind of messes things up. He talks about day one is meant to show God's providence. Day one, Genesis 1. Day one, he creates the environment for what goes in that environment on day 4. You always add 3 to the number. Day 2 sets things up for what's going to go in on day 5, and day 3 sets up day 6. So he's got that in there. That's good, which a lot of Jewish and Christian scholars have noticed. He's got a whole section on Adam in the New Testament. That's good. By reading, this is a conclusion, by reading Genesis as canon, that means it's in the Bible, right? Guided by the principles of religious focus, ancient common sense in the light of the New Testament, nothing is lost of Christian theology that was truly biblically based to begin with. Right? Whether it's humans made from a mud pie or whether it's kangaroos hopping into an ark, whatever. What is completely lost, however, is the unwarranted program of trying to read Genesis as though it were either a good or bad scientific account of the origins of the universe or human. That's not what Genesis is. Also lost is the hermeneutical program that assumes Genesis needs to be harmonized with the sciences that investigate those origins. Good. He thinks there's a point of convergence between religion and science at a deeper level that helps us, guides us. That's good. He's right. It's modern people that read Genesis and they irresistibly shift gears to cosmology, astronomy, physics, biology, which can encourage seeing Genesis the wrong way. Either that, Genesis gives modern science, or Genesis gives a different science. They're both confusing. And his position is based solely on a strict reading of the text of Genesis and in the way Paul uses it in Romans 5. It's high time that we Christians buried the encyclopedic assumption and its subordinates once and for all. Not just because they give aid and comfort to naturalists, but because they are false to the text, false to the language, the stylistic convention structure. Most of all, they betray the purpose, God's purpose for Genesis. Hopefully we're reading Genesis the way God intended. Okay, I might favor the questions based on what we've just looked at, but we can actually cover any question in this final session. And if there aren't that many questions, that's fine with me. Yes, Mahershala Hashbaz. I can't really hear you. I'm sorry.
Can you add some of the details for the...
Can what?
Can you add details for evolution, or are there biblical references for evolution?
Can you support evolution from the Bible, are you saying? No. You can't support any scientific account of the origin of humans or animals from the Bible. The Bible's not a science book. And a biology book is not a marriage book. Yet we get crossways. If you want to learn about genetics and the way cells divide and recessive and dominant genes, you don't read Genesis to look for what God has to say. And if you want to learn about the family you want to bring up and how to guide them, you don't read a biology book. You don't get introduction to the fundamentals of genetics. Read that and now you think you're going to be a good mother. No, you read a book on parenting. You read the scriptures. So it's a misidentifying of what kind of book the Bible is. And it's not a science book. Go ahead.
Can you expand a little bit on how you might explain
If someone is unfamiliar with Genesis and Christianity, how would I explain the fall? Are you saying anything else? Well, I don't know if we'd explain the fall. I mean, what is the fall? Man rebels. See, the Catholics and most Protestants say that we're born damned. We're born with original sin, and the world is fallen. Well, the world is fallen, but fallen in what way? I can't go as far as the Protestants go. But is there a fall? Does the Bible ever say there was a fall? Or have we superimposed that? What I would say is the Bible diagnoses that the problems that we experience in relationships and also between families, clans, tribes, nations, has to do with selfishness, has to do with sin. Sin is a meaningless word unless there actually is a God and a true morality, a true right and wrong. So the Bible gives it's a mixed diagnosis. It says the problem, on the good side, our hearts really need some work. So there is a lot we can do if we repent. But the bad side is we're going to have to do that. The world's pretty messed up. And the humans are responsible. If you want to call that the fall, you can. The symbolism of biting the fruit? Fine, you could say that, we're always tempted to think we're above the law, to, little kid tests his parents, he kind of goes behind his boss's back and he does it again. That's a very human thing, but it can have real bad consequences. And it shows the danger. Genesis has a good warning for science, because originally, presumably, God would give them access to that tree of life, and presumably he would have continued to educate them. But to have eternal life, that the power of influencing beyond your lifetime, to live forever. Think of Hitler if he were immortal. That's really dangerous. So we had the immortality, but we had the morality. And when you mess up the morality, you don't want that connected to immortality, which is why the New Testament says only God is immortal. If our soul was immortal, then this would really be horrible. You just get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. So knowledge has to be used the right way. It's dangerous. A little learning is a dangerous thing. Drink deep or touch not the Perean spring. It's a couplet from some English poet. I remember that from high school. Alexander Pope, perhaps. Okay, 12 o'clock. Wow, that went quickly. I'm kidding. You don't have a question. Brian does. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate your class on world religions. I get to take through the weekend.
I'm glad you liked the world religions class, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to learn. I think pairing up with apologetics is really powerful. But maybe from what we've learned this weekend, what you've been teaching in this class, how do you think would be the best way to kind of, or any tips or things, challenges you give us to kind of reach people?
Challenge for you to reach people.
Yeah, like art is.
Yeah. Well, some people probably need a little more time to let it sink in before they go sharing, because it might come out confused.
In this postmodern world.
Yeah, but I think it's kind of fun to say, yeah, I attended a class where, we learn about other worldviews, but we even re-examine our own thoughts about Genesis. And wow, the teacher was a Christian, at least we think he was, and he really challenged the way we're looking at it. We've been very affected by our assumptions and upbringing and so forth, and it was quite liberating, as one very eloquent sister put it, and so forth. I don't know. I think telling people who are kind of skeptical, I'm getting educated, I'm getting schooled, I'm learning. That's a good thing, because you don't come across as a know-it-all, and it's fair to ask them. It occurs to me also you could ask the question: if you were ever to become a Christian, what kind of thing in this Bible or Christian belief would be really difficult to stomach? And some of those things might be misconceptions from Genesis. Another one would probably be about, what kind of a God would, even if you had never heard the word, but you were a pretty decent person, what kind of God would torture you for infinite time? That's a pretty good question. Okay, Don?
I can save my question until after this.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, mine's a little bit different, but I'm currently in school to get my doctorate,
You're doing your doctorate in what?
veterinary medicine. So,
You're going to be a veterinary medic. That's great.
yeah, so I'm just wondering from your perspective, what, like in the context of all these things, like what would be, or what would you recommend for me to put my focus on as I get into this field of, heavy sciences and different people like that? Like, because you're kind of saying you stand in the gap between science and theology, and so I don't know. Like,
As you get in the field of how would you best use this, are you going to be more of a researcher or more of a family vet? What do you think? Or a farmer, you help the,
whatever he wants.
yeah. I mean, you're more limited when, the more people you have contact with, but let's say you were like the vets that say our dogs go to. People love their animals. It could open up some really cool conversations. As a veterinarian, of course, I recognize that, we share a huge part of the genetic material with a dog. A chimpanzee is like 98, 99%. The code is almost exactly the same for a few changes. So we are animals, but we don't have to act like animals. Have you ever thought about that as a dog owner? Yeah, or I'd say, Sam Lang used to always say this, but I still say it. He had a dog named Riley. I project a picture of our puppy, Darcy, named after Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. Darcy's the best Christian in our family. Always positive, forgiving, warm, affectionate, doesn't discriminate, likes other dogs. I mean, she's just terrific character. But even a thing like that there are many ways to open up conversations that are personal, these conversational clusters. Now, if you want to do something more heavy duty, like write an article that'll be published or a book, you can do that too. But, everyone loves animals and people want to think they're being natural, but there's a huge contradiction in it. Because if we're going to be natural like the other animals, then I say we don't have to clean up after ourselves. It's fine to kill our young ones if they're competing, and it's certainly fine to leave your spouse. Find a happier hunting ground. There are very few animal species that are faithful, monogamous, so to speak. So I don't know. I have my book that came out on campus ministry gives very specific advice, warning, advice, things to look for, how to interact in about 50 different academic disciplines. That's the book on the table, the light blue one. I don't remember if there's one on veterinary medicine, but I've got a number on science and medicine, maybe 10 or 12 sets of counsel, 50 or 100 points. Maybe just skim that. Over here. Good, Jim, good, happy, all right. Uh-oh.
One thing you brought up was Christians should be continuing to learn.
Christians should be continuing to learn, yes.
The Bible should be something that they get into, questions that they have, they should be able to examine what science says, what the Bible says, and try and harmonize those. How much?
I wouldn't say harmonize, because I think that would be a big mistake. Bible's not a science book, so you can't harmonize. But I think you mean, showing that they don't contradict each other, they complement each other, right? Science gives us the how, Bible gives us the why. But I wouldn't say harmonize, because that's the thing that we do that is most destructive and drives away science people.
And I guess, what would be your suggestion for Christians? How much time should we spend on this?
How much time should we spend with further study? It's going to depend a little bit on your position in life, where you are. It'll depend a bit on your natural leaning, what you enjoy. There's not even a verse in the Bible that says you have to read the Bible every day. There are verses that say you need to meditate on the Word every day. So I don't want to be making laws about how much you have to read. I would say in general, the more influence you have, the better study you better be. If you're a house church leader, you're an elder of a house church, that's a good bit of responsibility. If you're tasked with looking after hundreds of people, you better be an even better student. Or else listen and consult frequently with those who are. And if you've got thousands of people, the higher up you are, the more strictly you'll be judged, which I think means the more careful you need to be. Not to say anything because I might trap myself. No, to do the research and make sure what you say is biblical. And that applies to every sermon I preach, every book I write, every question I answer, and Q&A session. Sometimes I mess it up. I'm tired. I forget what I'm saying. But for you, probably, I can tell you're a real reader. Yeah, I mean, there are hundreds of great books that will help you be a better Bible student and to think about science biblically. And so in the course, we had you spend time at the Biologos website and the American Scientific Affiliation, asa3.org. Those are great websites. Go to Biologos, go to ASA3, and let other people help you. Because there you'll find thousands of men and women. Many of them are professors in universities. Others are just people they're very serious and they write articles and books, and you can meet them. Read what they write. Usually it includes the email address. Write back to them. Ask them your question. That's what I do. Or I say, hey, I'd love to meet you. How far away are you from the airport? I'm going to be in your city next month. It's amazing how many times these guys say, sure, let's meet. Let's have lunch. I spent an afternoon with the president of the American Scientific Affiliation. I looked him up. I thought, I'm going to Boston. Oh, they're in Ipswich. We had a great time together. It was terrific. Look these people up. They're usually very accessible. They respond to messages. They're good. But that's what a lot of nerdy people do. Not that they're nerdy, or I am. Okay, right side. Question back. Nope, no questions there. One question here. Okay, we're going to take just a couple more in that case. Okay, my friend.
Can I ask a question about your last presentation?
A question about exobiology? Or about primeval? Yeah, that's what I thought we would be talking about now.
Because this is something I've heard but as far as Genesis 5, the genealogies.
Something you heard about the genealogies in chapter 5.
Right. Noah lived 930 years according to this.
Yeah, Noah lived 930.
Which means he would have been old enough to know Methuselah,
So he would have known Methuselah.
who lived almost up until the flood.
Right, so if you take these numbers literally, in other words, if you reject what I said about idealized ages, you have righteous people drowning in the flood. Not good.
Unless Methuselah died, had a heart attack, and then got sucked the flood.
Yeah, it's been pointed out that it
But my question,
probably had a heart attack when he saw the flood.
right, the clouds coming.
Look at the ocean coming up underneath me. Oh, he opened up the floodgates.
But the question, and what the person was trying to get across is that's how the genealogy, or how all this material got passed down, because Methuselah would have been old enough to know both Adam and Noah.
Okay, so you could make a plausibility argument that these guys whose lifespans, were ancient, that were able to pass on the true account of what happened. And I have no way to agree or to refute you. I don't know what to say to that. Of course, the longer you're around, the more people can consult you. The longer the apostles died before martyrdom, probably the more on track the church could be, because they could get their questions answered directly. Sure, but I don't know. I mean, what would be passed on anyway? I mean, what is it that, say, Methuselah knew that he would be passing on? What, the story of Cain and Abel? I mean, there isn't really that much to pass on, right? It's just 4 chapters, just a few paragraphs. And the evidence is very strong that those 4 paragraphs were written, at least in their final form, in the time of the Israelites, probably in the exile. Because Genesis makes those comments like, this was before there was any king in Edom. This is before there's any king in Israel. They're looking back at a time before the monarchy, implying that they're living during or after. And then there's so many pointers to Babylon. Where's the Tower of Babel? On the plain of Shinar, Babylon. It's called Babel. Babylonians, enemies, the exile. I mean, it's not hard to see, like Canaan is cursed and Canaanites, Babel. An alert reader who had 0 training would probably pick that up. Canaan, well, that's interesting. Babel, like Babylon? Yep. Gate of heaven, that's what it means. Or gate of God. But of course, it's not really you don't get to God by going up in a ziggurat. You don't get to God by some edifice. You get to God by being a person of spirit and truth, right? And so, anyway, I don't think it's that hard, but I think we are deeply indoctrinated. And then we're told, we hear about people who lose their faith because they hear a different view. And instead of saying, it's okay, it's not a salvation issue, half the time we say, it's a salvation issue. I mean, the first time I met as a young Christian, I was baptized at college. I went back to New Jersey, and I hooked up with the local church, the Church of Christ, which I'd never heard of before. And there was a canoe trip, and I was paired off with an old guy. He was like 40 or 50, and I thought he was very old, and he was a scientist. Our canoe had a hole in it. It flipped. He broke his hand. It was an interesting time. But I asked him, so you're a scientist. Do you believe in evolution? Because at that point, I was a young earth creationist. I thought, it's a big deal. He said, well, yeah. I said, well, how can you be a Christian? Now, for other reasons, not scientific, he was really struggling. I think he was depressed. He said, I often wondered that myself. How can I be a Christian? I just took that as fuel, like, challenge these guys. They're wrong, I'm right, even though I'd never even studied what I was talking about. I had read maybe 50 or 100 books and articles on evolution, but it was all written by the young earth creationists that year, my first year of college. So one day and I shared this in my book, one day I was looking for people to invite to some meetings in London, and there was some church that we met in a store, and it was all about creation and evolution. And they said, you can come in, we're about to meet. I thought it'd be small. I didn't think it'd only be 9 people sitting in a circle, and there I am, and they're trying to convince me, this is many years later, they're trying to convince me that unless I take Genesis 1 literally and believe the earth is no more than, they said, 25,000 years old, I'm going to hell. I'm controlled by Satan. I said, really, just for that? I could be sharing my faith and spreading the word and baptizing people and taking a stand against sin, but if I don't agree with you, I'm going to hell. He said, yes, you are. Oh, there are a lot of groups like that, my friend. So hopefully we can be peacemakers. These issues are not salvation issues. Neither is your view of Revelation. I think it's mainly about the Roman Empire. It tells us something about the end of the world, but it certainly doesn't give us many details about heaven or hell or anything else. It's apocalyptic language. But if you have a different view, that's fine. Because I might be wrong and you might be wrong, and it's not a salvation issue. All right? There are only like 5 or 6 issues that are salvation. Jesus is Lord, repent and get baptized, live obediently, women shouldn't wear men's clothing, and so forth. Things like that. No dancing or cards. So many, we have such a bad reputation. It's like the more serious Christians are viewed as party poopers, and rightly so. Right?